All right, so Dr. Rizwan Saleem was unable to make it. He didn't get a visa. He's a graduate of medicine from King's College London in 1997. During his clinical training, he commenced with his pursuit of Islamic knowledge. He had studied in Damascus, Syria with a number of leading ulama and received licenses to transmit and to teach the sacred sciences. Dr. Rizwan is working as a working consultant with special interests in forensic psychiatry and Islamic mental health. He continues to specialist Islamic studies periodically, privately, with classes with Sheikh Akram Nadwi in Oxford. Okay, so the title of his paper is Some Thoughts on the Islamicization of Biomedicine. It is generally agreed that with regard to the issuing of legal verdicts, fatwa, on medical issues, a mufti must consult a medical expert if he or she does not have the prerequisite knowledge of the field. However, Islamic scholars often fail to appreciate that the medical expert in question is likely to have a modern biomedical perspective, itself based on a certain philosophy of science that may in some fundamental aspects be contradictory to a Quranic worldview. Uncritical acceptance of medical experts' submissions can often unknowingly lead to dubious fatwas being issued. The purpose of the current paper is to highlight some of these areas of biomedicine in the view of the author that are in need of, quote, Islamicization, i.e. reconfiguration in light of a Quranic worldview. The views expressed in this paper should not be seen as statements of theological doctrine or Islamic pronouncements, fatwas. They are just personal opinions and ideas that are meant to open up the way for further study, research, question, and debate. This paper does not attempt to resolve the issues, but to hopefully open some avenues for further research, study, and collaboration. It is hoped that this paper may be of some small benefit to the fuqaha and Muslims in biomedical fields, to Muslim physicians and biomedical researchers and practitioners in giving them insight into how some areas of their field require reconfiguration in the light of revelation, and to the fuqaha in illuminating some of the complexities and subtleties that may often be overlooked when dealing with medical issues. The paper ends with some practical suggestions for the fuqaha and fatwa councils who deal with medical issues. Much literature is out there regarding some of the major themes touched upon in this paper, such as the critique of modern science and modernity in general, anthropological critique of Western biomedicine and worldviews. I hope that a unique feature of this paper will be the presenting of some real-life examples of how the theoretical issues concerned can manifest in the practice of medicine and issuing a fatwa. When we speak of, quote, Western biomedicine, we are, of course, referring to a system of medicine that is now completely globalized, and the epithet Western is simply to denote its historical origin. Also, it should be stated that at the offset, I am not an anti-science or anti-biomedicine or anti-modernity even. In fact, the scientific method building on an Aristotelian influence was one of the great developments of the medieval Islamic world, as is being increasingly recognized, and was no doubt fueled by a Quranic worldview. So scientific system of medicine, as Western biomedicine purports to be, is entirely Islamic. However, Western philosophy, while being fairly compatible with its Islamic counterpart and primogenitor during the initial Enlightenment period, later took a definitive agnostic/atheistic direction, arriving eventually at the contemporary bouncing between relativism and positivism. This regressive direction, from a Muslim point of view, led to epistemological and ontological differences with Islamic theology/philosophy that have significant impacts on the theory and practice of science and biomedicine. The areas impacted by these differences are those in need of an Islamic reconfiguration. This paper attempts to begin to unpack some of these differences and demonstrate, by way of example, some of their real-life effects and medical practice. Scientists themselves, including medical practitioners, often regard their field as a purely, quote, objective one, and indeed such is the generally held view of science. Muslims in scientific fields such as medicine may be surprised when confronted with the idea that they hold subtle underlying assumptions which are contradictory to a Quranic understanding of the world, or that epistemological and ontological considerations may lead to medical theory and practice that is contrary to Islamic teachings. In addition, ideas such as progress and virtue of scientific advancement are deeply embedded in the modern psyche. Yet they are relatively new. Related to progress was a theory of evolution put forward by Darwin in 1859. These twin concepts soon came to justify the arrogant racism that characterizes the colonial age. All of human history was seen as a long journey culminating in the emergence of rational white man, who had consequently the burden, the duty of bringing enlightenment, science, and liberal ideas to other more, quote, backward races. These rather quaint notions began to be rejected in the West following World War II as colonial empires collapsed and growing awareness of the horrors of the Nazi eugenics programs rapidly made racism a taboo in the West. It was Darwin's theory that penetrated so deeply into the European conscious that it extended way beyond its original implications into many spheres of learning. For example, social Darwinism, which took the idea of the survival of the fittest, applying it to human societies, thus implicitly helping to justify the idea of racial superiority. Assumptions about biological reductionism and determinism are embedded deeply into modern science and biomedicine and ought to be questioned by Muslim researchers, especially in light of the Quranic-based ontology. Medical anthropologists have highlighted how the biomedical approach leads to objectification and dehumanization of the human being. Work by Muslim researchers could be directed as well as to how and why such effects occur, and how an Islamicized biomedicine would avoid such negative consequences. Although evolution in its widest meaning is not necessarily incompatible with Islamic doctrine, in my opinion, there are aspects of evolutionary theory, as generally understood, that are problematic. Some Muslims talk of the idea of evolution being compatible with Islamic belief and describe a type of divinely guided evolutionary process by which God is supposed to have created the human being. In my opinion, this may be on the verge of theological acceptability, although it still leaves us with the intuitively repellent image of Adam, peace be upon him, having almost human, ape-like parents. But this divinely guided version is not evolution theory. It is something quite different. Evolution theory relies upon random mutations and natural selection. There is no place for divine guidance. The failure to maintain clear definitions has led to futile debates between Muslim scholars and scientists and much time wasting. Evolution theory, as generally understood, contains elements that are clearly contradictory to Islamic belief. These include ideas that living beings are in a constant struggle against each other, survival of the fittest, and a hostile environment, and constantly evolving and improving through the mechanisms of random mutation and natural selection. This is contradictory to the Quranic message that all of creation has been subjected to the service of mankind, that Allah has created the human creature in the best form. Something that is best cannot be improved by definition. According to evolution theory, there is no reason for the process to stop at the arrival of Homo sapiens. The human being is expected to continue to evolve over millions of years to come and may end up a completely different species. The Quran appears to contradict this. The notion of man being in a constant struggle with fellow humans in his environment may be traced back beyond Darwin's theory to Thomas Hobbes' idea of the uncivilized man as savage, or possibly even deeper to the Catholic idea of a hostile world whose every pleasure is to be resisted. Such deep, often unconsciously held ideas pervade modern man's view of the universe and infiltrate into biomedical notions of a hostile environment containing a whole plethora of enemies, viruses, superbugs, etc., from which the human creature must be protected, vaccinated, and treated. They also link the idea of progress and evolution and the central idea that scientific advancements are crucial to improving health and survival of the human being. In short, the idea that science can improve on nature. Seen from an Islamic or Quranic view, however, these ideas are untenable. The Quran tells us that God created for you human beings all that is in the earth. And have you not seen that God has subjugated for you that which is in the heavens and that which is in the earth, and has bestowed on you his favors outwardly and inwardly? The human being is the Khalifa of Allah upon the earth, and all things have been subjugated to his service. As the Khalifa, the human being is already in a state of perfection, the best form. Rather than the idea of a constant struggle for survival in a hostile environment, the Quran seems to support a picture of man living in balance and harmony with his environment, the beautiful and peaceful existence of those who worship their Creator and live according to divine guidance in this world. And there is for you on the earth an abode and a provision for a time. Muslim physicians during the Islamic age, 622 to 1700, were particularly attracted to the ancient Greek medical concept of humoral balance, which essentially sees the human being as a creature in balance within himself and his environment. It was a physician's role to remedy disruptions to the inner balance or constitution resulting from poor dietary intake or environmental insult by using measures to bring the body back into its natural state of harmony. In the Islamic Greek medical model, the environment was not hostile. Disease was due to an inner imbalance which needed to be restored. This is not necessarily contradicted by modern germ theory, because we know that many potentially pathogenic microorganisms are found in healthy people. Hence, disease must be due to additional factors. The germ is necessary rather than a sufficient cause. So we could possibly employ the traditional Islamic Greek notion of inner balance to provide n or slash the additional factor. All of this is not to say that Islam is anti-science or anti-modernity. On the contrary, we know that it was Muslim scholars in the Middle Ages who developed a modern scientific method and made great advances in many fields. However, it may be that Muslim scientists understood the place of science as a means of enhancing, not improving nature. There's no question of improving that which is already perfect, the perfect creation of God. No want of proportion will you see in the creation of Allah the Most Gracious, so turn your vision again. See you any flaw? Again, turn your vision a second time. Your vision will come back to you dull and discomfited, in a state worn out. Okay, so in the interest of time, because I would stop him at this point, because there's he's out of time here. I'm just going to jump to his conclusionary section here. And he says, this paper has argued that some areas of modern biomedicine are in need of a process of reconfiguration so that the worldview provided by Islamic revelation can properly inform its theory and practice. It has attempted to begin to delineate some of the parameters through which this process can be initiated by examining some of the underlying assumptions and principles of modern science and biomedicine. This is a necessary endeavor so that Muslim physicians of the future can develop their science, or art as some prefer, in a direction that is informed by Islamic teachings. It is also vital for the fuqaha engaged in legal matters relating to medical issues to be aware, at least, of the issues raised in this paper, so that they are able to consult experts required. A suggestion would be that any serious fatwa panel looking into medical issues should contain requisite experts of the fields of medical anthropology, naturopathy, philosophy of science, in addition to the standard biomedical experts. This would be an interim measure until such synthesis as suggested above and Islamicization is achieved, which may take a generation or more. And finally, all praise is due to Allah the Exalted. Okay, so that was Dr. Rizwan's paper. So now we're going to open the floor for questions that would go back to Dr. Sadolsky's and then for the other papers here. And maybe Dr. Rizwan's. I can try and channel him. So,
that's inshallah. So we'll be back here at 11:45 for the next panel of 5 presenters. Jazakallah khair.